All right, and we're live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the YadaCoin Sunday broadcast. I'm Matt Vogel, founder and developer of YadaCoin. Today we're going to be doing a tutorial. This is the first installment of a series of tutorials that we're going to be covering. And this is just the first one, so we're going to be starting from the very first step. And that first step is going to be user authentication. So, what does that mean? The user is going to tell your backend service that they are going to claim they are a certain identity. They're going to say, this is who I am. That's the first thing they're going to do. And that's the first thing we're going to cover. The user is going to say, this is who I am. And that is going to cover us delivering a YadaCoin identity to a given service. And then, after that, the second part we're going to cover is the authentication part. Now, this is going to show how Web3 is going to replace usernames and passwords. So we're going to fully replace usernames and passwords using our identity widget. And so this is going to be a new concept, and so I thought it'd be a great opportunity to guide you through it, whether you're somebody who's trying to learn how to code just in the beginning and you wanted to build something cool, or you're an experienced developer and you're looking to try something new and add a new type of login authentication to your service that's more secure, that is, quite frankly, better than usernames and passwords. So, if you're ready to graduate into the next level, into the Web3 sphere, you're in the right place. So let's go ahead and get started with the demo. I'm going to get that set up real quick. So let's go ahead and transition to a quick break, and I'll be right back. All right, so now I have my window up here, and I'm going to start the demo, or the tutorial rather, by just opening a new file. So the first thing you're going to want to do is just create a file called index.html. This is going to be super basic. We're going to try to go the most basic possible. So for this tutorial, you shouldn't even need to start up a web server or anything like that to serve up this HTML page. What you're going to do is you're just going to drag it directly into the browser, and I'll show you how that works. So the first thing that we need to do is get the demo code, or get our HTML page initialized here. So we're just going to start from the ground up. So we're going to do HTML. I'm going to go do the head thing. We're going to have a body. And I'm going to have the full code for this tutorial in the link, or in the description for this video. So you'll be able to visit the link. It's going to be on GitHub, and that way you'll be able to look at the full code and play around with it. And it'll be a good reference implementation for any application you're trying to do. All right, so we have the base HTML put in. So now what we're going to want to do is just put in some buttons. So let's just put in, a title. So it's a YadaCoin Center Identity Tutorial 1, User Authentication Demo. Then we will go ahead and add a button, and that button is going to have a couple classes. These are bootstrap classes, and so we just want to make it a little bit prettier. So we'll have the bootstrap CSS included, just to make things look good. You don't have to do that if you don't want to. All right, so then we will have our containers for the identity that we choose. So here we have a button that says get identity, and it's going to call a get identity function. Okay, so let's go ahead and define that function. So if we're going to do that, then we need a scripts tag up here in the head area. And then we're going to define the get identity function. And what is that going to have inside of it? Well, that's going to have a pop-up window. So we're going to pop up a window, and this window is the identity widget that every YadaCoin now has as of version 5.1.0. So if you want to go ahead and update to that and change this URL to your local node /identity, that will work also. Okay, so right here we're calling the method, and that's basically going to tell the identity window what we're trying to do. And that will say we're trying to get our identity. That's all we're trying to do. So that window that pops up, it's going to have the instruction of the method, and it's going to say we're trying to get that identity. It's going to tell that window that we're trying to get the identity. So let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to drag this index.html file into my browser window. So let me go ahead and do that. 1 second. I have to bring that Chrome window up. Okay, now you should see it. Okay, so now I'm going to transition the Chrome window. Boom. And you should be able to see that. Yes. Okay. So now we have the get identity, and it's going to display whichever identity we select. So let's go ahead and click that button, and now we have the get identity interface. This is the pop-up that has opened in a new tab, and so we can either locate our identity that we previously have saved using the map feature, or we can import an identity using our username and our WIF key. So if you already have a YadaCoin wallet and you want to use your identity from there, you can grab your WIF key from the export identity feature in the wallet and use it here. So I'm just going to use the test identity I have available. So I'm just going to say test ID, and this is just one that I'm always using. Feel free to use it if you want. This one's centered on this intersection in Athens, Greece. So I'm going to click this intersection twice, using this private username. The public username can be different if you would like. So you can change it to whatever you would like for your testing purposes. I just chose test ID. It's completely arbitrary. But for this testing ID to be used for this key retrieval, you have to use 4444 and that location to retrieve an actual private key. Okay, so I'm going to, now that this identity is imported, I'm going to select this test ID from the list. And that's all for that right now. So we're going to go ahead and add some more functionality. Okay. So what we wanted to do is actually display the identity that we selected here. So let's make it do that. Because right now all it does is just grab that. So what we want the window to do is actually listen for messages, because that's what this pop-up is going to do. It's going to send messages back to the opening window. So I'm going to add some code here. I'm going to add the pop-up reference. So you can see here that we have the pop-up equals window open. So we want to make that available in a broader scope. We want to make that available inside this event listener. So the window event listener message, that's going to get called from the identity window. So this YadaCoin.io/identity pop-up window is actually going to send a message back to this index HTML page. And this window event listener is going to intercept that message. So let's go ahead and let it listen for that. So we'll go ahead and say, let's go ahead and close that pop-up window when we get a message back. And then let's go ahead and display that. Let's go ahead and display that username when we select the message. So this will find the identity element that we have down here, and we're referencing it by ID, get element by ID, identity, and this is the H2 with the ID of identity down here in the HTML. And then it's going to change the inner HTML to the event data identity username that we received back from this message that the pop-up sends back. So the pop-up message is the pop-up window is going to send a message back through this event. So this event is going to come through, it's going to have some data, it's going to have an identity, and one of those properties is going to be username. And we're going to assign that to the inner HTML of this H2. Okay, so let's go ahead and test that. So we go here, we refresh the page, and then we go back to this, and we use the identity that we have saved, and then boom, we select it, and bam, test ID is there. Okay, so we have that implemented now. So what are we going to do with that ID? Well, what happened already? So we need to grab a challenge code with that ID. So what we're trying to do is actually authenticate with this service. So at this point, we're just saying, I just want to grab my ID. So I've just grabbed my ID, and I used YadaCoin.io to grab my identity. Now I could use my local node again. If I just replace YadaCoin.io with my own local node, or whatever node I choose, then I could grab that from there. Okay. So what are we looking at here? Okay. So now let's go ahead and add some more code. We want to authenticate. So we want to get a challenge code from the back end. Now this is going to be a randomly generated ID from YadaCoin.io, and it's going to save a reference between my identity and the random code that it generates. So this random code that I'm calling a challenge code, is going to be assigned to my identity on the YadaCoin.io side or the Yada node side. Okay, so let me go ahead and change that real quick. Okay, let's make that more readable. So what we're doing here is making a call to the challenge endpoint of YadaCoin.io. Again, all of the Yada nodes have this endpoint, so you can replace this with your local node URL. So I'm going to be posting some JSON. So we're going to set the content type to application/JSON, and then we're going to stringify the body of this object and send that along as JSON. So we have the public key, the username, and the username signature. The username signature is just the username signed by the private key. And that's the reference that is going to be tied to the challenge code. So now that we have that in place, this is going to be our request to the challenge endpoint. Okay, so again, all we're doing is sending our ID. All we're doing is sending our identity to this endpoint. That's essentially all that's happening. Is we just got our identity from the pop-up window, and then now we're going to send that identity to YadaCoin. Now, YadaCoin is going to assign a challenge code to this username signature on their side. So let's go ahead and do that. Even though this won't really be a visual experience, but let's just go ahead and do it anyway. So test ID. Boom. Okay, so test ID, and actually let's open the console just so we can see that that's working. Let's do this again. So test ID, we'll select that ID. Boom. All right, then we'll go to the network area, and then we'll go to the challenge. And so you'll see that the payload is exactly what we have here, right here, except with the values populated that came back from the pop-up. So the values that came back from the pop-up have the identity's private key, has the identity's username, as we can see above, and then it has that username signature. Okay, so now we sent that to the challenge endpoint. Boom. And the response was that it was a successful response. The status is true, and this is our challenge code. Now, what are we going to do with this challenge code? So this is authentication in Web 3.0. Okay, so this is the Web 3 part of things. So if we could take a break for a second. What we're not doing is using usernames and passwords. So, what? Can't see what? Oh, can't see me. Okay, let me hide some of these windows. Okay, so what we're not doing is we're not using usernames or passwords. Okay, so can you grab a piece of paper? I think I'm gonna try to draw for a second. I wish I had one of those like top-down like drawing things, to show what I'm drawing more clearly. But so instead of you going up to a door and like let's say you need to get access through a door, right? And there's like a bouncer there. And they open the little slide thing, and they say, what's the password? And then you say the password, okay? Like anybody could know that password, right? So the internet decided, okay, well, we need a username to go along with that password. So now the password is going to be unique to each username. So that's good and all, but so let's say in that scenario, you would go up to the door and then you would say, here's my username. My name is Matt V123. And then the bouncer would say, okay, I found your name on this list, but what's your password? And I'd say, okay, my password is V123. And he says, oh, okay, yeah, that matches, right? But then somebody could be listening right beside the door, someone I don't see, and then they could come up later and they could say, my name is Matt123 and my password is V123. And boom, they're in, right? So there's obviously a vulnerability there, is that somebody could spy on those credentials that are being sent out loud or through the door. Pardon me. So so the difference with Web3 is that we're going to do authentication without relaying any sensitive credentials over the wire. So nothing private is going to be transferred over the wire. And that's the key difference. And so the way this works is, I'll give you an analogy, because it's all cryptography and math and all that stuff, so we don't have to get into all that. So basically what happens is, try to picture two machines that go together. So every person has two machines that go together, okay? And one is for me, I never give that machine away, and then I give the other machine away to everybody. I can give that machine away to whoever. And what that machine is going to do is change an object into something else, okay? That's what both of these machines do. They change one object into something else. So what happens in the scenario of the bouncer is that I'm going to go up to the door, and let me draw this situation. Okay, so I'm going up to the door. Okay, so here's the door. So here's the door. I've gone up to the door, and then I am going to give the bouncer, I'm going to give the bouncer some kind of object, right? I'm going to give them the machine to decode or to transform whatever object they put into it, okay? So let's just say that this is the machine that they have right there, right? So this is this machine. It has like a conveyor belt in it, and whatever, something goes in this direction and then comes out the other side as another object, right? And my machine behaves uniquely in accordance with the other machine that I don't give away. Okay, so the bouncer is going to give me a pony, okay? So let's draw that. I don't know if I'm drawing this pony that well, but we'll try. Okay, so the bouncer has, we've transferred this pony, right? So this is essentially the challenge code, right? So the bouncer has given the pony over to me, right? And so now I'm going to take that pony and I'm going to run it through this machine I have, right? And what's going to come out the other side is an alligator. Okay, so I'm going to try to draw an alligator, and this is probably not going to go that well, but that's fine. So funny. Okay, so I've ran it through my machine, and now what comes out is this alligator. So he's given me a pony. I run it through my machine. I spit out an alligator. Now, what happens is I hand him back the alligator. So I gave the bouncer back this alligator, you see? Now, the bouncer is then going to take the alligator and run it through this machine that I gave them before, okay? So the alligator's gonna come through this machine, and what's gonna happen? It's gonna spit out a pony. That's right. The alligator's gonna turn back into a pony. And that's how they know that I am this person. That's how they can know that I actually am who I say I am. Because this machine corresponds to this machine. Now, what if somebody else comes up with their own machine, right? So what would happen in that scenario is they would shove this alligator through their machine, right? And what would come out is just a big pile of nonsensical stuff. Okay? So what comes out is this. Not good, just a heaping, steaming pile of nothingness. So it's like, then they're like, okay, well that doesn't make sense. So obviously that's not you. One second. I think we, one second. I think we lost the camera. One second, we have to go to commercial break. I think we've lost the camera. 1 second. I'll be right back. Okay, we're back. Sorry about that, everybody. The camera battery died. We're still a pretty low budget production over here, so try to bear with us, and we appreciate your patience. So, okay, so I've tried to explain with this analogy what is actually going on. You can see that it is a bit more complicated than traditional authentication, but it has to be because you're not transferring any sensitive information over the wire. So because all the information is public and yet you're able to establish a secure connection, things tend to get a little bit more tricky. So now that we have that, I'm going to go ahead and go back to the example, and we're going to get authentication going all the way. So Now we have a way to get our identity. So now all we have to do is authenticate. So we've gotten our identity. We're getting a challenge code back. So let's use that challenge code. Let's sign the challenge code and then return it back to the service signed, and they can verify that the signature is valid, that the signature is indeed produced by the identity that requested the challenge code. Okay, so I'm going to add another case here. Actually, we're going to wrap that other one in another case. So okay, 1 second, please. So we're going to say if the method is identity, then do all this. So the pop-up window, we're going to use the pop-up window twice. We're going to use the pop-up window to get our identity, and then we're going to use the pop-up window to sign the challenge code. Okay, so given that, we need to accept messages through this event listener for both pop-up window responses. So we only want to handle, well, we want to handle those responses separately. So for the identity pop-up response, we want to handle it here in this data method equals identity response, and then we're going to make another one here, event data method equals sign in. So we have a identity method and a sign in method. So we're going to get we're going to make a request to the authentication backend. So let's go ahead and do that. So again, we're going to close the pop-up window when we get a response back, and the method is sign in, and then we're going to produce a request, and this code is very similar to what is above. So let's just look at that real quick. So we have data going to auth. So again, we could change this to any Yada node because they all have these endpoints. So the difference here being that this is not challenged. Now we're using the auth endpoint. And what we're doing is we're sending the signed challenge code from this response. So we're getting the response back from challenge containing a challenge code. We're setting that here. And then we're going to open this new pop-up window. And let me go ahead and add that function. I think we got ahead of ourselves just a tad. So let me add that get off function. Actually, I got way ahead of myself. I need to add the HTML for that also. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we're going to add the HTML for the authentication. So now we have get auth. So we need to add this authenticate function. Let me show you what that looks like in the interface here. Okay, so we get the identity. Okay, just to recap, we grab that identity. So that identity is loaded. Now we have a challenge code from the back end for that identity. Okay. Right, so we have the challenge code here. So the challenge code came back for that identity. And again, Test identity was sent in the payload, and then the response preview here with the challenge right there. Okay. So you might want to make note of this, just the last couple of digits here, because you'll see that in the pop-up as well. So we're going to tie this button, this Authenticate button, to an Authenticate function. And that Authenticate function is going to give us a new pop-up window. Okay, so get auth. Boom. So again, we're going to use the identity endpoint. When we open the window, that's going to load the identity widget, and the method this time is going to be sign in, and the message is what is going to be signed by that identity. So instead of just getting the identity like we did with the identity method, the sign in method is going to sign the message parameter that we give it, in this case the challenge code. Okay, so what does that look like? So let's get the identity again. We're going to select the identity. We have that. Now we're going to say authenticate. Now it's going to open the window again, but this time we have this message up here telling it that the method is sign in, and we want to sign a message, not just get an identity. So when I select this identity, now it's going to tell me, do you want to sign this message? Now, this is the same challenge code you might remember. Let's say B24. Let's go back and see that challenge code. See the B24 down there? So that's the same challenge code that we're signing with our identity. So I'm going to go ahead and hit sign. Boom. So we're back here. Okay. So it signed the message, and then it sent the signed request, or it sent the signed challenge code back to the auth endpoint of the node, and along with our username signature, because that's what it tied the challenge code to. So what the auth backend is going to do is look up that username signature and then find the challenge code that it associated with that username signature, and then it's going to take that username signature, or sorry, it's going to take the username signature, find the challenge code associated with it, and then it's going to use this challenge signature with our identity's public key to verify that the challenge signature is correct for that identity, thus proving that it is indeed me who signed that challenge code. So let's go ahead and get the result of that. Well, we already know the result here. It's auth equals true. So let's go ahead and just display that in the front end. So what does that look like from a user experience perspective? All right, so all we're going to do is just display this information. So the data comes back from there, given these parameters, and we're just going to show the result of auth. And auth is just a true-false sort of thing. So let's refresh the page. Let's start over. We're going to select an identity, test ID, authenticate, one second. Okay, and then we're going to use that to sign that challenge code, which is different this time because we have a different challenge code. Oh, looks like we have a typo. Oh, console. All right, let's start one more. Let's do this real quick. So select the identity, and then go back, and then select the identity, and then test identity. assign it, and then boom, authenticated. Okay, so how do we know this works? So let's select a different identity and try to sign that challenge code with a different identity. So test ID 1. Oh, sorry, wrong one. Okay, test ID 1. So we'll use a different public username, and because the username signature is different, it will not authenticate. So we're going to sign the same challenge code, and authenticate equals false. So you have to use the same identity to sign the challenge code as you did to request the challenge code. And that's what makes this so secure. It's like the challenge code that's given to you is actually assigned to the ID that requested it. And that basically wraps it up, everybody. I think that that is about enough for our first tutorial on user authentication and our first tutorial for YadaCoin and Center Identity in general. I really hope that you guys found this helpful, and if you have any questions, definitely don't hesitate to leave it in the comments. Make sure you like and subscribe, join our Discord channel, follow our Twitch stream, all that stuff. And yeah, again, I just really appreciate you guys coming out and watching the stream. And we're gonna do this again next week, and hopefully yeah, you guys will be really excited and engaged about learning this new Web3 technology. All right, everybody. Cheers. See you next week.